everyone, I hope you're well. I am so excited to film this video. This is the top books of 2019. When I was making this video, there were so many other books that I was like, oh, that was a charming read, that was a lovely read, I really enjoyed that book, but I decided to just whittle it down to 10 books, and these are the books that will live with me forever, that I will reread, that after I had finished the book I wanted more of the book. The characters stuck with me. Sometimes I just sit and think, I wonder what's happening to this character, I wonder if this character got what they wanted. The books that really will like stay within my heart. But I have read a lot more books than these 10 books this year that I really did enjoy. So this is my top 10 books of 2019. This is probably going to be an exceptionally long video. It's a settle on in, and I'm just going to get straight into it. This is in no particular order. I do have a favourite book, and when I get to that book I'll tell you that's my favourite book of the year. I already told you it's my favourite book, but the rest of the books I love equally. So I read The Mothers by Brit Bennett. This is about a 17-year-old girl called Nadia. Her mum has recently committed suicide and she's starting a relationship with the pastor's son, but the pastor's son doesn't want the relationship to get out. At the beginning of each chapter it's women within the church who are kind of like the elders talking about Nadia, and wild Nadia, oh she's off the rails and all this different stuff. It goes on to the subject of abortion. It also deals with the difficult relationship with her dad, because her dad doesn't really know how to love and how to cope, and obviously his wife's killed herself, he doesn't know how to deal with it. And it's very much about church life and gossiping and how people can kind of distort the truth, but then it's also about people keeping secrets. So she and the pastor's son are keeping their relationship secret, but the elders know what's going on and people know more than what you think they know about situations. It was just heartbreaking. Like, I sometimes think, what's happened to Nadia? Like, as if she's a real person. I'm like, oh my god, I hope Nadia's okay. I'm worried for her safety. How's she doing? Like, I'm proud of her. Like, I just connected to this in such a way, and it's got nothing to do with my life. That's not why I connected to it anyway. I just loved it. I thought it was brilliantly written. I thought the characters were brilliant. Nadia, you just love her so much to like the core of her being. I thought it was incredible. I thought it dealt with the subject of abortion really well, that people think that some women just have abortions and that's it, they don't even think about it, but how abortion is actually a very traumatic thing, and it's something you have to really think about. It's also something you have to live with for the rest of your life, and that some women think, well, what if I'd kept the baby? Well, the baby would be 2 now. So that's a running theme within it, is one of them has an abortion and then it's like, oh, the baby would be 2, the baby would be, and it's almost like they're being haunted by the abortion, haunted by the baby that never was. Oh my god, this is such a phenomenal book. I actually want to reread it now. Like, as I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh, should I just reread this next? I loved it. I thought it was absolutely stunning. I'll read everything Brit Bennett ever brings out. Incredible author. I then read a book that was originally in Japanese. This is If Cats Disappeared from the World, and this is about a young man who finds out he's going to die soon. He's got a few more months left to live, and the devil comes to him in his apartment and says, if you get rid of one thing every day, one thing within the world, so like something abstract like telephones, it's not his personal possession, it's like possession, so you would get rid of all telephones, or you would get rid of all cats, or whatever. If you get rid of one thing from the world every day, then I'll give you an extra day to live. So you have to keep getting rid of stuff. And he has a little cat called Cabbage. That's why it's called If Cats Disappeared from the World. And I loved his relationship with little Cabbage. And then it went into the boy's kind of past love life, his family, all different stuff around him. It was heartbreaking. It really was. But it was also just so funny at the same time. Like how he was talking with the devil, and there's a bit where the devil arrives and is in a Hawaiian t-shirt. And it's so absurd and it's so like bizarre to read. You're like, am I tripping? Like, what's actually happening in the story? But then at the same time it's so poignant, and it's about being a human and the human existence, and I just loved it. And also, if we did get rid of things within the world, how would that affect everything? So if we got rid of the telephone, what would that affect within the rest of our life? So you can't just change one thing and take that off the planet, because it would change the course of everything. Oh, I thought it was so good. It was so beautifully written as well. I absolutely adored it. This is one that I picked for my book club pick, and this is A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. I've read A Room with a View by E.M. Forster and absolutely adored it, so I thought I would love this as well. and I loved it. So this is set in the time when English people basically went over and ruled in India. They took parts of India and they ruled it, and it became like British India, it was called. And they made the Indian people work for them, and they didn't see the Indian people as equal to themselves. So this story is about a group of English people who have moved over to, it was called British Raj, but it's basically English people just like carving out bits of India for themselves. But British Raj, they're living in British Raj, and some of them are the English people that have just arrived in British Raj, and it begins and they're talking about India and the surroundings and everything, and then we're introduced to a young doctor, and the doctor is Indian but he has an English friend, and he's introduced to the group. And then an English woman gets assaulted in a cave. She thinks, she's not sure what's happened, she thinks she was attacked in a cave. The doctor was with her and there were other English people with her, but they immediately make her point the finger to the doctor because he's Indian and the rest of them are English. They are racist towards him and they say it must be him. It can't have been one of the English people, and she's not sure what's happened. She's very disorientated by the whole thing because of the heat, because she's not dealing with the heat very well. So she's very disorientated about it, and then it's basically one of the men kind of coerce her into saying it must be the Indian doctor, and she's really unsure. And then the rest of the book, it's about what happens to the doctor, but then there's also the friend, the English friend to the doctor who introduced him to the group, believes he is innocent, and there is an elderly English woman who doesn't really know the doctor. She's had a few conversations with him, but she really doesn't believe that he did it. She thinks that Adele, who's the woman who says she's being attacked, Adele's misremembered. The woman was there and she doesn't think it's the doctor. And so then it's about their conversations and what happens, what action they're going to take, what people's opinions were at that time. It is such a fascinating book. It's difficult to read because obviously there is like a lot of racism within it, but I think this is such an important book, and I loved it. I thought it was so good. And also the way India is described is just beautiful. Like, oh my god, amazing how the landscape and the heat and everything. I thought it was beautifully written. I loved this book. I thought it was great. Another one that was a book club pick is Alice Walker, Now is the Time to Open Your Heart. This is my favourite book of the year. You can tell by the amount that I tabbed on it. This is my favourite book of the year. Just stunning. Adored it. So this is about, the woman is 57-year-old black woman called Kate. She is an American and she lives with her younger lover Yolo, and at the beginning of the book she decides to go on kind of an alternate medicine retreat, very extreme alternate medicine, and she leaves Yolo and she goes on this journey of kind of discovery, and her ancestors contact her through the medicine she's taking, which is called grandmother's medicine. Her ancestors contact her and they were slaves, so they're telling her their stories of slavery. It's about her finding herself. It's then about the other people in the group, who some of them have had sexual violence and other things happen to them, and it's about them telling her their stories and how the medicine is helping them. And at the same time, Yolo, her younger lover, he goes to Hawaii, and he goes to Hawaii just for a holiday, but he meets someone from his past in Hawaii by complete chance, and his life is changed by that. One thing that I didn't say in my video review of this, because I have a whole video review on this as I do the majority of these books, all the video reviews that are in full of these books, I will link them down below, but one thing I forgot to say in my video review of this is that it's very much about, you can be in a relationship with someone and love them, but if you truly love them, you will let them go. You will let them do what they want to do. And I do feel in our society it's very much like monogamy, and then you have to stay together, and if someone says, oh, do you know what, I want to go on holiday by myself, it's like, why? The relationship's over, they don't want to spend time with me. It's like, stop being so codependent. You're two completely different individuals. If one of you dumps the other one, you may be heartbroken, you're not going to die. Yet society has this kind of romanticised version of Romeo and Juliet. If she leaves me, I'll kill myself. It's like, what? You are a person before you met her, you are a person after you met her. You need to be like individual. Like me and Dom don't do everything, Dom's not my friend, we don't do everything together because we have different interests. We can go different places. We live together, but we can go and do completely separate things that we want to do. We don't need to be in each other's business all the time because we're two completely different human beings. We're not the same person. I don't sign my Christmas cards from Hannah and Dom because I want to send Christmas cards to my friends, and he probably wants to send, I don't think he minds too much, but like he wants to send stuff to his family. We don't need to be completely connected. I can know people that he doesn't know. And that's fine, because I had a life before I met him, so I knew people before I met him, and all my hobbies and interests that I had before him and I'll have after him. That's it. And so I do think people compromise way too much in modern day relationships, and if their boyfriend says, you know, I don't want you to do this, I don't want you to do booktube or whatever, they'd be like, oh, I had to shut down my channel because I love him so much. And I'm like, ugh, that's not a relationship, that's control. Like, I would dump someone if they told me you have to get rid of something, I don't like you doing YouTube or something that brings you happiness, that's not harming anyone. That's ridiculous. It's coercive control, it's madness. But this book, back to the book, is about he loves her, so he allows her to go, but also she's not his property to rein in. There are so many other things that I spoke about in the video, and I discussed every single one of these tabs that I had tabbed, but I just wanted to add in a point that I had forgotten from my review video. So if you want a more in-depth look at this, completely spoiler free, then I will link that video down below and you can have a little look at what I thought of this. But I just loved it. I love Alice Walker, I loved the writing of this, I love everything I've ever read from Alice Walker. I thought it was really great about kind of so many different alternate medicines, but then about finding yourself, and you know, if you love someone you let them go and they might come back to you, they might not, but we are all individuals. We are not like meant to, we weren't born in pairs to pair up with other people. We were born by ourselves, and that's it. It's okay to be by yourself. I just loved it. Like, I just loved it from start to finish. I really did. I lapped it up. My favourite book of the year. Absolutely adored it. We then have a lovely little fun one. This is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery, and this is about a brother and sister decide that they're going to adopt a child, and they think they're going to adopt a little boy who's going to help them out on their land, and arrives this lovely ginger little girl who just is so curious about everything, and she's so kind, and she's so like, oh, she's just so open to everyone and open to loving everyone and seeing the good in everyone. So the brother and sister decide that they're just going to keep Anne, and they kind of fall in love with Anne, and everyone else falls in love with her, and it's just kind of her stories with the people who live around her and her just breathing joy and light into every situation. But there is kind of a bit of sadness because Anne hasn't had a family. She's just so loving and she just wants this family, and you really feel for her. You're like, I want her to have a family. Every child deserves a family, and it's so sad that children don't get that opportunity. And oh, I just loved it. I thought it was so funny and just glorious. Absolutely beautiful. Highly recommend. I recommend all these books, obviously, like highly recommend. Just go out and buy all these books because they're all absolutely amazing. The next one is by Ocean Vuong, and this is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. This actually came out this year, and I requested it from the publishers because I thought it sounded like an interesting book. And this is about a man who I believe he is a 28-year-old man who is American, but his mother and grandmother are from Vietnam. So he has been raised in America, so he's talking about that, but then having a mother and grandmother who have raised him from Vietnam, and it's about the Vietnam War as well, and how that affected his mother and grandmother, and how the trauma of the war just lived within them for the rest of their lives. And his mom, which is his mum, has PTSD from the war and has violent outbursts that she can't control because of that. And Lynn, who is his grandmother, protects him from his mother and her violent outbursts, but Lynn actually has schizophrenia, so sometimes will trail off in what she's thinking, so she'll protect him as a boy, but then she's mentally ill herself. And this book is a conversation with his mother. So now he's an adult and he is reliving all those events, talking to his mother, and just like a one-sided conversation with her, saying, this is everything, this is how I felt about these different moments, I love you, the war was awful and it obviously haunted you, the trauma for the rest of your life. And it's about war and how even when people get out of war-torn countries, and even when they're in safe countries and they're in safe environments, sometimes the damage the war can do to people mentally, you know, it's horrendous. It causes terrible mental illnesses, and I think we do talk about that. We call it in the UK shell shock, when soldiers go away to war and then they come back completely different people and they have mental illnesses and trauma because of that. But we don't really talk about it to do with civilians, that when civilians come out of a war-torn country or a war stops in their country, how it doesn't stop within their mind. It's not just, oh, the war's over, that's it. The tragic event that happened traumatises them over and over again for the rest of their life. And if they don't have access to any help because they don't have money to have that, what are they going to do? They're just continually going to be traumatised throughout their life, and how devastating war is. This was just beautiful. I absolutely loved it. It also talks about someone being gay and having to hide being gay. It's just amazing. The bit that I tabbed in the book is he was talking about childhood, and how in childhood where nothing I ever knew died. And so when you're a child, there must be a point when nothing dies. And obviously it changes for different people, because your grandma might die and that's when you first realise death, or your mother might die very young, so you might realise death a lot sooner than your classmates. But that we all had a point in our time when we didn't know people could die. We didn't know death was a thing. And I just really loved the wording of that whole passage, like how pure we were, and how to not have the fear of death or losing our loved ones. We all had that at one point as a child. I loved the way it was written. It was just stunning. It was stunningly written. I absolutely adore this book. Beautiful. Highly recommend that. Highly recommend. I recommend them all. Next up I have a Tracy Chevalier. I read 2 Tracy Chevaliers this year. The Lady and the Unicorn I really did enjoy, but I decided to choose my best out of the 2 that I read, and this was my best. This is Remarkable Creatures by Tracy Chevalier. Tracy does historical fiction, so this is actually about 2 real life women. These women did actually exist. Mary Anning and Elizabeth Phillpott, who lived in Lyme Regis in the UK. So Mary Anning was poor, and she used to find fossils in Lyme Regis, and she really had a skill for it and an eye for it, for finding fossils and cleaning them up and selling fossils, and that's how she made money. And she was very poor and lived with her mother. Elizabeth Phillpott was a much older woman who was from money, and she befriended Mary Anning because she just had an interest in fossils. And then what happened is people realised how great Mary Anning was at finding fossils, and this is all like what happened, I'm telling you what happened in real life. So they found out that she was like amazing fossil hunter, but this all happened in the early 19th century. So what men would do is Mary would find all these fossils and these amazing creatures that had never been found before, and then men would buy the creatures off her, wealthy men, and they would say that they found the fossils, when really Mary had found the fossils. But she was poor, so there was nothing you could do about her. Also, the whole field was dominated by men at the time, so there was nothing she could do. And so Elizabeth Phillpott thought this was very unjust, and wanted Mary Anning's name to be on these discoveries that are in like the National History Museum, you know, these great museums, these fossils toured the world and everything. She wanted Mary Anning to get some kind of approval, some kind of recognition for what she did. And the book talks about that, and the book talks about the 2 women's friendship, because 2 women were very different, sorry, not difficult, they were very different women from very different backgrounds. Also just how it describes the beaches is just stunning, and also just the injustice of the whole thing, that these men who were wealthy just bought these creatures that Mary Anning had found. Mary Anning had cleaned them up herself, because when you find a fossil it's within a rock, so you have to take it out of the rock and everything. So she'd cleaned the whole entire thing up, and then if you go to a museum it will have a man's name on it. When Mary Anning found it, they didn't. They just had enough money to buy it, and because they bought it, they got their name on a little plaque. And it's just so, it's so unjust. But I loved this. I loved also how Mary's like mind worked with finding fossils and everything. I thought it was beautiful, really gorgeous book. Loved it. But you will leave it feeling like injustice. But I did really enjoy that. I then have a Toni Morrison. This is Toni Morrison Jazz. I have read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye and just adored it. I thought it was stunning. Jazz is about a woman called Violet who her husband has an affair, and her husband kills the girl that he has an affair with. This is set in Harlem, America in the 20s, and Violet and her husband are black and they live in a black community, and it's about the racism that they face. It's also about how the 20s, if you think about it, to do with civil rights, and you think about it wasn't so far away when the slavery and different stuff, so it's talking about that as well, how that kind of plays within her madness, because Violet basically goes mad, and that's not a spoiler to the book because it happens really early on. She just loses her mind, and you're thinking, is it to do with the affair? Is it to do with her husband killing the girl he had an affair with? And then you realise it's just everything. It's to do with so many themes and how corrupt the American system was to black people at the time and still is now, and how it held people back. There are so many amazing scenes within this. There's a bit where she just sits down on the pavement and other people are talking about it, and they're like, Violet just sat down on the pavement one day. And that's not like an extraordinary thing to do, but when you really think about it, someone just walking along the street and sitting down on the pavement and not talking to anyone, you can see the madness is creeping in. There was a bit with a bird which absolutely broke my heart. This is a book where I'm just like thinking of Violet all the time. Violet goes and visits the girl that her husband was having an affair with. The girl was living with her aunt, and she goes and visits the girl's aunt, and it's such a moving book. It's just stunning. I absolutely adored it. It was beautiful, heartbreaking, but beautiful. I then read a Jane Eyre retelling. This is by Rhys, and this is Wide Sargasso Sea, and it's a story of Jane Eyre, but it's set in the Caribbean is really where it's set. And it's, oh, I didn't make any notes. Oh no, I did. I didn't make any notes. Wait, 2 whole pages through. But it's set in the Caribbean in the 1830s, and it's about Antoinette. It's telling you about her life to the reader. So think of the idea of Jane Eyre, but set in the Caribbean at that time, and she is considered too white for certain people and too dark for other people in the Caribbean, and it goes into that, and it's just spectacular. The writing, don't. Like, I just love it. I feel like you either like her writing or you don't, and I just adore it. I think her writing is so poetic, it's so beautiful. Antoinette is a character that I always think about, and I read Jane Eyre this year and I enjoyed it, I really liked it, but I prefer this. I just feel the writing was just so, oh, so lyrical. It was stunning. Adored this. And then the last book, this year I read a lot of books that won the Man Booker Prize. I requested them from the publishers and got sent them, but the only Man Booker Prize like book that I read and liked, this is about a young chicken farmer living in Nigeria. He one day stops a woman from committing suicide. She's going to throw herself off a bridge. He stops her doing that and he drives off. He then decides he's going to go to university in a foreign country, and his friend decides to help him, and it all goes devastatingly wrong. I don't want to give you any spoilers. I haven't given you spoilers for any of these books that you wouldn't already know about them. And then it just follows his life, and then the woman who he saved her life, he reconnects with her at a later date by chance. I absolutely adored this, and let me just say, within it is Igbo cosmology, which is something some people in Nigeria believe in. It's kind of like a religion, and they believe that we have spirits within us, but those spirits aren't our own spirits. So we almost have like a guardian spirit living within us, and this whole book is told by his spirit that is living within him. And the spirit, you feel, is talking to a higher power and saying, look, I was there, I was with him, I couldn't help him because the spirit can't control you. It can give you kind of ideas, but it can't control your actions in any kind of way. But it's like his spirit is pleading with a higher power. He's a good boy, he's a good person, he didn't mean to do this, he's not a bad individual, and kind of trying to make us feel on side. But there's such a sense of dread that it's all going to go terribly wrong, and when it does, it's just absolutely unbelievable. I'm not a fan of big books, let me just say that, and this is a big book for me, but when I had finished it, I wanted another 200 pages because I thought the storytelling was so amazing. I absolutely adored it. So I'm going to end this video here. I loved all 10 of these books. Please tell me if you're going to read any of these books, or if you have read any of these books, and what your opinions on them are. And I will see you again soon, very soon, for another video.